Are we live? We are live. I think we're all live. Wade did say that we're live. Welcome to Webinar Wednesdays. It is a Wednesday. I'm not too sure what. Darrell,
yes,
is it
sir.
Wednesday or Thursday in New Zealand?
I'll tell you, Thursday's weather today is slightly overcast and high of 17 degrees.
So welcome to Webinar Wednesdays, your information portal into all things moving to Microsoft 365. I need an intro. I need an intro video to play that. This is episode 2, numero uno. No, that's number 1, right? Number 2 of the Modernize and Migrate series with Xillio. And in today's, well, we've got Jeff with us. So, Jeff, do you want to give any shout out to anyone?
Hey, it's great to be here. Great to see my friend Alistair and Darrell here, hanging out in New York City for a few days from LA. And no, I'm just psyched to be a part of this. What a fantastic topic. Change management in Microsoft 365, what you need to know. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Thanks.
Jeff, I'm glad the title isn't all you need to know because we wouldn't have time.
That is for sure, especially with the 3 of us.
So Jeff, you're the director for Xillio Americas, right? I can't remember.
Correct.
That. Yeah. So we're excited to have you on this episode of the Modernize and Migrate series, and we're going to pull in Jeff every so often just to give his thoughts and opinions along where we are taking this topic. If you can't hear us, just some housekeeping before we jump into the slide deck. If you can't hear us, there should have been a dial-in number on the invite to this webinar. So you should be able to get standard audio through your phone if you cannot hear us right now. We'll also be circulating this webinar on demand to you after this session, and I think we'll also be sharing the slide deck with you as well. I'm not 100% sure. The marketing team from Xillio will get that across to you. Please pop your questions across. I think the chat is enabled. I'm not sure if Darrell's going to add his magic to this as he normally does. He shows up 3 minutes before the event and he says, hey guys, we want to try this. So you might have another way of actually communicating with us. There is a Q&A available to you, so please use that. We'll try and stop during the webinar to answer your questions, or we'll answer your questions at the end of the show. So pull up a chair, grab a coffee. If it's the evening like it is in sunny South Africa, the South Africans on the show, please grab a whiskey because a lot of people like drinking whiskey in South Africa. So I'm going to move through this. So yes, the slides do move, which is important as long as that click goes through. So making content work, Xillio's catchphrase, and it's really about what they do with legacy ECM systems and a whole bunch of other things. So just a little bit about me. My name is Alistair Pugin. I'm an Office Apps and Services and Azure MVP, and I work in sunny South Africa. And on today's show, we've got I always say Darrell
Your
Webster
terrible New Zealand accent.
From the land down under. But are you north of Australia or south of Australia? I never know.
Yeah, I think the official term is down under and to the west a little.
All right, to west. A little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what your star sign is.
I'm under all the stars because that's the sky up there. I'm a adoption and change management specialist, working for WM Reply, also working for myself as modern workplace change, and generally just trying to help people and organizations make the most of Microsoft 365 by aligning people and technology, but really it's about technology aligning to people, isn't it?
And Jeff, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you buy your shirts.
So I recently joined Xillio as managing director of the Americas. Super psyched to be a part of it. I spend my time really being a Sherpa for organizations, leading them through this idea of digital transformation. As organizations are trying to figure it out, every CEO is talking about it. No one knows exactly what to do. I'm their guy. And guess what? It starts with migration and having that strategy around what to do and when to do it.
Yeah, and we still want to know where you buy your shirts though. I personally want to know. A good friend of, Kevin Else, right?
Of course.
Yeah, So we know that he purchases his suits somewhere in America, right? There's a tailor that makes his suits. The last time I saw him, he was trying to hook me up with the guy because it was apparently quite cheap. So we want to know, before you actually end this call at the end of the show, we want to know where you get those shirts. So who's Darrell? This slide was in last week's or 3 weeks ago's episode. And what were we talking about? Switching everything on and off here, Darrell. I think that was the heated debate we had to one of the ignites, right?
Yeah, that was turn it all on in Microsoft 365. Of course, that got quite heated with the audience and with the panelists on the stage, as you can see.
So, and this is where it really is, right? I mean, we have these discussions, we talk a lot about change management. And for me, the biggest question, right, before you even get through the door, organizations are saying, why should we move to Office 365 or Microsoft 365? Or why should we take what we have on-prem and actually stick it in the cloud? Any thoughts on that, Darrell? I mean, what is the contributing factor to wanting to move your collaboration ecosystem from on-prem that you've been running for the last 20 years to the cloud? I mean, what is the driving force behind people wanting to move?
Reach and the ability to work from anywhere and everywhere. We're familiar with these phrases and reasons why, but when you do make that your main aim to move the content into Microsoft 365, into the cloud, you are opening up lots of different ways to keep control of your content, share your content, collaborate, co-author, all those other C's.
Jeff, from your perspective, from a compliance world, right? People are also very hesitant to move when we start talking about regulatory compliance and what you need to worry about when you start looking at data loss prevention and records management. And I know we have another webinar coming up to talk about compliance, but just your thoughts on where the world is moving because you are looking after Xillio in America. What is the world saying to you when they start talking about regulatory compliance in M365?
I would say begin with the end in mind. The first thing I think about is, why are we doing this and what is our end goal? At the end of the day, right, records management and Microsoft 365 really helps organizations manage all their legal obligations, provides the ability to demonstrate compliance with regulations, and at the end of the day, increases efficiency with regular disposition of these items that are no longer required or, required to be retained and no longer of value, therefore no longer required for business purposes.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense for companies to move to the cloud. And we were having, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, we always said that hybrid is a journey, not an end state. And a lot of times we end up with hybrid being an end state. And the other conversation we were actually having, and it's actually just slipped my mind, the other conversation we were having was, it's not so much are we going to move, but when we are going to move. And that's a decent segue into the next slide, which is really around tech versus behavior, because it's taken Microsoft probably about 10 years. I can't remember when BPOS, Jeff, you were around with BPOS, right? I think, Darrell, you were around with BPOS as well, Business Productivity Online Suite of
Absolutely.
Services. That was the first Office 3, or Microsoft's first take at Office 365. And I think we've come a long way into where the technology has actually evolved too, where you could literally sign up for an M or an Office 365 tenant right now without a credit card, go make some coffee, and by the time you get back, you have collaboration ready for you. But Darrell, you were talking earlier on in one of those boards that you sent me this morning, and it's really about tech versus behavior. The tech side is sorted, right? But the behavioral modifications that we require from organizations in order to adopt the technology. And for me, it's always this, right? We've got showing my kids the slide, the first phone, and I was chatting to a good friend of mine earlier on this evening, and he was chatting to his kids, and the kids were saying one of their school projects was to go back to your grandparents and get them to give you a picture of something that was functional back then. And he said, well, back then, the telephone, right? And his kids, I mean, they're 9 now, I think 9 or 10, and they said, Dad, what is this thing on the left, right? or your left or my right, I don't know which one, but the little dial thing, right? What is that? And then he said, well, we had this phone, right, where we had to press 3 times to get the letter C to come through. We never had touch screen phones. And his children were taken aback. They were like, but that this does not compute. How is that even possible? Why would you do that?
Alistair,
Yeah.
did you tell them that is why it's called a dial? When you dial a phone number?
It was Warren that was having this conversation with kids, right? Not my kids. My kids are fairly tech savvy. I mean, they're 16 now. They don't worry about these things. They've seen this 3 years ago in another slide deck, but it's really about tech versus behavior, right? And when we start talking about behavior, I mean, this is what we face with, Darrell. I mean, you must have seen this slide over and over and over. What are your thoughts around this concept of change and how they actually impact these generations that we have to deal with in the modern workplace?
Well, first of all, I'd like to call out, while I am calendly a Gen X, I am a Gen Z by attitude and mind. This span of people reflects who we have within our workforce. And this is always changing, of course, as time goes on. But we do have to think about each of these audiences, interests, age gaps, when we're trying to create some interest and awareness and shift people into these new behaviors. If you don't think or consider these groups of people and you treat everyone the same, you are going to get certain levels of success and resistance.
Yeah, my mom, strangely enough, she won't answer her telephone, but she'll send me a Facebook Messenger message, right? And she's in the silent generation where, out of necessity, she asked for a touchscreen phone because she didn't like the one that didn't have a touchscreen and she couldn't navigate Facebook, see what my kids are doing, right? And I suppose a lot of the tech versus behavior is one's a carrot and one's a stick, right? We know the necessity is to move, right? But for a Gen Xer, from a behavioral perspective, it's more about what's in it for me, right? So why should I adopt this new technology that I have to now skill up on, and I need to figure out how it works, and the buttons are not here, and I'm used to Skype and I'm not used to Teams. You know, it's a big thing, and we call it the fear factor, right? What people are facing today. And in today's world, I mean, this is an oversimplification, but thanks to Matt Wade, people now have access to Jump to 365, and I encourage everyone to head to Jump to 365 to get a view of what the landscape looks like. I mean, we know that this is the tech, right? But how do you get organizations to use the tech?
Well, let's pause there, Al. If I was to lay this in front of a regular person who wants to maybe think about using Microsoft 365, how would they feel? Would they do this and go, which product am I using? I'm using that one. Okay, now what? Or should they flip this around, instead of it being a what to use when question, maybe it should be a when to use what, and start with a scenario.
When I speak to customers about Office 365, right, it's always, do you know what you have? And it's, yeah, we've got mail in the cloud. We got a bit of storage in the cloud. There's this thing called OneDrive, right? That's the two things. They never talk SharePoint, and then they say Teams, right? So we've got collaboration. We can do meetings, and then I show them the slide, and they step back and they go, "That's impossible. We don't pay for all of those things." And then it's really taking them through the actual capabilities of the platform. And that's why I said early on, tech is ready. The tech is there, right? It's the usage of the tech that's always the tricky part. And when you walk into these large organizations and they are at a C level, they are saying, yeah, we want the tech, roll it out. You've got 18 months and you need to get 40% utilization. Otherwise you don't get a bonus, right? And that's what these C levels and mid-level managers like IT managers and the success managers inside of organizations are faced with. They got to roll out the tech. But I mean, what is that impact? I mean, and then you show them something like this, just from a security perspective, and they're super overwhelmed, right? I mean, imagine going to IT and say, hey, look at this security slide, right, around cybersecurity, and you need to get this in place before you even start looking at that, right? I mean, that's the conversation we're having. It's as much as we want to talk to business and say, hey guys, there's these really cool features that will improve your productivity, and use terms like productivity enrichment, time to value, time to market, and everyone gets excited, and HR gets excited, and marketing gets excited, and sales gets excited, and then we go to IT and we say, hey guys, we need to roll out some cybersecurity stuff, right? And everyone's working from home, and that's the case. But Darrell, in your world, and you're dealing with people on the ground, right? Well, what does it really look like for the average Joe Blogs, the average citizen inside of an organization? How do you approach this behemoth of solutions, right? In order to get them to utilize the technology so that it doesn't become a white elephant?
Yeah, let me just quickly take over the screen sharing thing to take you through the whiteboard that I have behind me, because it does have a few good points coming through.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So what we were talking about just earlier was comparing tech to behavior, or tech to people. So I wanted to use a relevant scenario for us, which is talking about file collaboration. So the tech side of things will be going through all of those lists of questions, and in terms of also security, compliance, what we want to do, what we want to make available, all those guest access questions. They'll all be aiming to try and get to that desired state of share our files in OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. So that's functions and features. That's all about what can I make available, and how should I do it for best practice for our organization. On the ground, for regular people, they are faced with this kind of challenge. Well, that means that I have to become proficient in uploading a document, opening a document, sharing a document, co-authoring content. There's version management, so I'm not going to be doing V1, V2 on the end of my file names anymore. I've got to access these things in application browser across devices. You see the two conversations going on. You've got tech and this multiple work streams to get the workload stood up properly. But just as important is bringing people along that journey and helping them to gradually learn their skills about where their content's going to be. And like, to put it in a relevant context too, a customer is going to be moving into a new co-working space in a great new building, or rather activity-based working space. On day one, if they were to go next week and start to work in all these neighborhoods and scheduling time on desks and stuff like that, they've got to go paperless. Is that going to happen next week? Is that going to be something that people just naturally pick up? No. You're going to go through that same curve again with certain people that might pick it up, some that won't, some that are going to need a lot of help. So that's the challenge on the ground, and that's why you need to think of using a change management and adoption program.
Do the standard ones work, Darrell? I mean, that's my question. I mean, there's change and transitional management. There's a lot of frameworks out there. Have these change and transitional management applications and methodologies been adapted for Office 365? With the same fundamentals work though?
Yes, you do have to adapt it. You have to adapt it to your size of organization, what's appropriate to you. Some of the well-known methodologies out there can have 6 to 8 different plans that you can spend a lot of time talking to the right stakeholders, getting things all together and planning for the transition. And then you've got plans, right? So that's not going to be appropriate for a 200 to 300 person organization. But one thing that you do really need to address, it doesn't matter what size program, are the areas of communication, education, and demonstration. Those are the 3 key things. And to bring it into our current challenge with COVID, a year ago, I was helping an organization trying to shift onto Teams, 3,000 people across multiple different countries, time zones, also multiple different platforms. Wasn't necessarily a Microsoft shop, but that was a decision that was made. Do you think it was an easy task to do it when everyone was working from home? What was the biggest challenge? It was communication channels. And if they're not established and you can't get the word out about this change, and people aren't able to look to find out, where do I get engaged and what do I need to know, the whole program is going to fall over. And especially when you're not, in touch and in person in the office.
Are you still sharing, Darrell, or can I grab it?
You can grab it and go ahead. I'll let it go there.
Okay, so coming back to what we were saying earlier, share and full screen. So what it really looks like, and we've seen that periodic table of platforms, right? And what Microsoft is really trying to drive inside of your organization is that you are going to front it with Microsoft Teams, right? That's the approach. Teams is the front door into all of these ancillary services. And naturally, on the back end, there's some messaging. There's the Office suite from a browser perspective. And for those that want to integrate into it, you use the Microsoft Graph API. Jeff, from your perspective, I mean, when we start talking, and we're going to have another webinar to talk about the complexities of proper enterprise content management migrations. Is this platform enough for organizations today? Or do they still have another 30 applications just managing their content management solutions?
I want to take a quick step back and comment on what Darrell just sort of went through in the whole steps to change management. And I love that your whiteboard that you laid out for us, Darrell. I think, again, I love taking steps back and asking what's in it for the end user, right? So the whole idea is preparing for that change, right? Establishing, why are we doing this to begin with? Establish that sense of urgency and importance, right? I don't know if we do that all the time, and then create that sort of coalition, sort of get the band together, develop that vision, strategy, and a timetable. When we build out, when we're getting ready to do a migration project, I want to see a roadmap. I want to see a timetable. Once we do what we're going to do, then what are we going to do, right? Get those short-term wins, those sort of quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, if you will. And, I hate to say it, but empower and reward, that sort of action, and then continue to reinforce it, re-communicate that vision. And again, at the end of the day, reinforce that change along the way and anchor the new approaches in that culture. We haven't said the C word yet during this webinar, right? Culture, right? These projects are 80% culture, 20% technology. So think about that as we're sort of getting ready to move.
100% right. And you are right. We haven't spoken about the culture, and culture's bred either from the bottom up or from the top down. And if anyone has read Simon Sinek Starts With Why, he talks a lot about culture and what is the ethos of the organization. And when it comes to operational change or organizational change, because this is quite a big change, right? As much as we think, well, I still live in Outlook, I still use Outlook to send an email, my platform for collaboration working inside of Microsoft Teams, even if you're coming from WebEx to Teams, or you're moving from a different platform to Teams, it's just I've got a new sales guy that started last week, and he comes from a Google environment, and he's now on a Mac, and he's using Teams, and he's still getting used to how calendaring works, right? And this is someone that's fairly tech savvy, but he's still struggling. So I can only imagine, and to your point, Jeff, what's in it for the end user, right? What is my buy-in, right? What's my value prop? So what do I get out of it at the end of the day? And it's almost as if we've gone full circle, where nothing much has changed in the world except the technology, right? People still need a reason. They still need to understand the tech. And a lot of times we think out of necessity that tech is just going to win, and we spend all our money on tech and no money on transitional management. And what happens? 3 years later, you have another consulting services firm come into the organization to replace the technology that wasn't working, right? I remember when I used to work with a product called LiveLink, during unsuccessful rollouts, they used to call it Deadlink because nobody used it. And no offense to OpenText, but that was, I had 3 customers calling it Deadlink because money wasn't spent, enough money wasn't spent on change management and adoption. So for me, when I look at at the logical approach to this, because we've talked about the tech, we talked about a little bit about the social behavior of humans based on the generations that they're coming from. I used to joke about the older men in organizations and then I realized, well, I'm 46, right? So I can't reference a 47-year-old male, right, wanting a 374-page white paper on the use of SharePoint in organizations, because that was our world 10, 15 years ago, right? We were selling to these people saying, well, we're not tech savvy. We run a business and we actually want white papers to give us irrefutable proof that the technology works. And today, I mean, I can turn my kettle on from my phone, because that's how far we've advanced with technology. So naturally for me, when I look at, well, we want to roll out, or we're moving 3-4 million documents from a legacy ECM system into a product like SharePoint Online. Naturally, I want to know where we start. And we got to start at the beginning. Yes, we know we need identity and access management and then we move on to mailboxes. And then after mailboxes are in Microsoft 365, we start looking at where's content stored. We look at file shares, we look at personal storage, we look at desktop storage, and that whole thing starts moving along quite aggressively, because everyone thinks, well, when you're in the cloud, you're sending mail from the cloud, you're in the cloud, everything else should work. So for me, naturally moving on from that perspective, I would want to start looking at what roadmaps are available, because it's a journey, right? So how do we put together a roadmap of these are the services that you start consuming, what the operational change of said services, not only to business, but also technical. And I blatantly stole this from Tracy van der Schijf. Darrell, you've seen this one that she's built out before. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah.
But this is what Tracy drives, and she's probably the largest adoption person I know outside of Darrell. When it comes to the approach around skills, right? When we haven't even talked about digital literacy, and she's got a slide that she uses, and we'll get on one of the later episodes, probably, what is it? It's April, probably June, July, we'll get on to the show to talk about our approach to digital literacy. And the numbers are staggering that she uses. And when she does these things, because we use her quite extensively in South Africa, I've actually got on a few projects around change in management and user adoption. We're not even going to build a practice. We're just using her because she's top 3 in the world, and Darrell being in that top 3 list. But she talks to literacy, right? When you interview someone, and I think I'm interviewing someone on Friday, digital literacy is high up on the food chain, right? Yes, we know the tech works, but if you are not proficient in how Word works or understanding simple things around practical and critical thinking in utilizing the tooling, you're not going to get very far with the tech, right?
Yeah, that's the good thing about this model Tracy has, is it's starting with the need and the theme, not here's a tool and figure out how to use it. So if you're wanting to build out your skills and communicating proficiently, then these are some of the apps that you'll need to get into and start using. Now, she does in her courses and various things dive into a pathway as to how to use those, but that's the starting point. Rather than it being, all these functions and features, it is about scenarios and use cases first. And digital literacy is a base level for everyone to measure against.
So, and it's at the heart of, and I still like the term enterprise content management, not content services, or ECM 2.0, right? I still like the concept of ECM as a discipline inside of the organization. And when we look at what Office 365 is really purporting to be, it's an enterprise content management system. In ECM, we'll jump into what it used to look like and what it looks like today. This is the old, I think this is a 2003 ECM 101 poster from AIM, the governing body for all things document management and obviously now content services. And I'm not going to talk too much to it, but it talks about how do you get information in, what do you do with it, how do you get it to your organization, and what do you do with it after it's served its purpose, right? And when we look at what that looks like, because in the old world, it was also always about ECM 1.0. document and records management being a big thing. Darrell, are you seeing, when you start looking at operational change and transition management, do you focus quite heavily on document and records management? Is that a core focus? I mean, that would be the underpinnings of, well, if the file is gone, what do I do from a compliance perspective?
It does come up when it's a customer that really values it and needs it. And it is a bit further along the steps for teaching the skills. One of the things that we'll show a bit later on is this concept of a learning pathway. And so this is something that, sure, in an organization where it's crucial and you need to know, this is a skill that you'll have to teach further along the scale. Yeah.
And talking to that, I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly. When we start looking at the underpinnings of enterprise content management and things that organizations have to start thinking about when they move into these silos of technologies that make up Microsoft 365, it's important to understand what's available. Sort of an extrapolation, the technology behind that periodic table that we've seen. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm just going to slide through it. And then when we look at this, and I mean, you've seen this before, right, Darrell?
Yes.
Have you not looked at the slides, Darrell?
No, it just takes a few seconds to come through. So
No,
Zoom is not zooming as fast as, I'm sure this was a last minute slide you added in there now. Yeah.
I remember, yeah.
Wow. But when we look at what we're talking about specifically around Microsoft 365, outside of the techie stuff, right? I can manage a desktop with Microsoft Intune. I've got a Windows 10 license, and then I've got Office 365. But from a content store and from a usability perspective, because Teams sits on top of SharePoint, right? I mean, that's the body underneath the head that is Teams is SharePoint, and you've got all these cool features that's available to you from a composite application perspective. Are you seeing customers diving straight into SharePoint that's never worked with SharePoint? Do they even know that SharePoint exists? Is that a thing? Are you seeing that?
Look, with marketing being very effective with Microsoft Teams, to the point where we're getting banners in certain places. It's less about SharePoint now and more about let's create those spaces for collaboration, and SharePoint just happens to be the thing in the background. For those who do have an intranet, maybe they've had one on-prem and they wanted to shift it in online, or they do currently have it in SharePoint Online. SharePoint is a thing. Those organizations have already been along the journey, but a lot that have rushed to using Teams to work and collaborate remotely, and while we've been in COVID conditions, SharePoint's just invisible in the background as a service that offers great file capabilities and storage and management and compliance and the like, all in the background.
Jeff, your experience with SharePoint, I mean, you from Tahoe to today, right? Like Heather always refers to the stalwarts of SharePoint. I mean, we started working with this when, 2001, right? I mean, it's 20 years. We had SharePoint's birthday a few weeks ago. Are you seeing that sort of rate of adoption when it comes to, we don't know what SharePoint is because we're using Teams that we've never touched on-prem?
I'll be at a cocktail party and I'll say, yeah, I'm a SharePoint consultant. And, you get that sour look. Yeah, we have SharePoint, and then fill in the blank. And of course, my job in life is to turn their frowns upside down. I don't care, like a hot dog. I don't care what's in it. Just make it taste good. I don't care if SharePoint is behind the scenes. Just make it work and make it look good. That's what I love about Viva now, is that we're able to take that SharePoint framework and make it look pretty, make it easy to use, get that adoption that we're all looking for, right? Every organization that I've been working for, and I've been a ambassador forever, right? Evangelist, all of those things. I see Yammer, no one is really using it because unless we get that buy-in from the top, people aren't using it. You see bits and pieces and it's disappointing, but I'm hoping now with Viva, with SharePoint as the plumbing, that things are that adoption is going to be more plentiful, and that when you say the word SharePoint, people aren't sort of cringing.
And we've also seen what Microsoft has done around content services, which is the ECM 2.0 space. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I want to talk about Project Cortex around content understanding and assisting organizations to understand what content they have, right? And something going forward, and Viva Topics is now quite a bit integrated in the experiences side of Project Cortex. I think they've rebranded quite a bit on Project Cortex when it comes to SharePoint syntax around the document understanding. And then we've got Viva Topics, which was the topic card side from an insights and knowledge exploration perspective from Project Cortex. So Darrell, once we've gone through this huge ECM understanding, I mean, we're still back to the same question, right? What do we do from an optimization perspective to get the organization ready to adopt everything we've just gone through on the slides?
Very good statement, Al, because we have focused sort of 50%-ish on the technology and saying that this is why and this is what we can move to. And even that this discussion around Project Cortex and topics, we tend to gravitate to those as features and go, yes, our organization needs to get a competitive advantage by putting knowledge in a place that's easy to access and find, and we'll surround it with SMEs. But there's a journey to that, and even topics itself. Like, I installed it, tried it out, sat there for a bit, and kind of hoped that everything would magically fall in place. It doesn't happen that way. And that's why Microsoft had created some good guidance around how to run an adoption and change program around topics. There are roles, there are things that people have to do for something like that. And it's generally the same principle for any of this technology that we're putting in. ECM, you've got your content management, you've got topics and connections and all the other things that are coming out with Viva later on. We have to answer the why, just like Jeff said earlier. We do have to think about how it fits in our culture, and we have to ease people into it. And that requires identifying what are the scenarios, the use cases that are going to be the benefit to us as an organization. That's what people are going to buy into. That's what you have to make your program around. Al, is it a good time again to try and use an example with the file sharing features thing that I tried a bit earlier? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, we do.
Cool. All right. What I'll do is just drop something in the chat for the audience, and we'll go back to sharing that board. What you'll see, once I get this on here, is I put out a question or two on social media. Share your favorite file sharing and collaboration management feature. And this, just to illustrate this is the kind of way that if we have, as technologists, put this technology out there, we've ticked all the boxes and put all best practice in place to make it work, the parallel journey that has to happen, not after the fact, but at the same time as we're addressing the technology work stream to make it work, at the same time, we should be planning to bring our people along that journey. And that means identifying what are the scenarios for how this technology is going to be used. How are we going to change that behavior to how we want people to work? And so my friends and various different people on social media have given some of these suggestions. I can see a few people in, hopefully, that are adding their suggestions as well. But a lot of these things are their features, their capabilities, and we need to put them on a spectrum. How do we get people to understand how to use these things? Let's take a look at real-time co-authoring, for example. Is that a good place to start? Well, maybe it is. Let's just unlock our board, and we'll just drag that as a thing on a timeline. A learning pathway, if you will. A learning pathway is not just a playlist. It's not just a thing where you can put different videos about how to use and do stuff. It is actually starting at a point where here's the basics of what you need to know with file management, and then gradually going through to these other great things around how to use topics and how to apply metadata. So this is the sort of thing that we need to think about as it works with within our organization. What about, okay, so manage metadata, and that's one from Rob at Xillio. Maybe that's further down here in terms of what we need to know on a timeline and in a learning pathway. OneDrive shortcuts. I think OneDrive is a good place to help people start to get familiar with how to work with files in the cloud, because when you attach it and synchronize it to your desktop, it still gives them that familiar experience in Files Explorer. They've got their folders, they've got what looks like shared drives, except it's got little fancy icons beside it. So we look at these sorts of things and we sort of apply, let's say Louise with metadata at the other end here. Yes, sir.
Seeing that it's True Confession Wednesday, I love OneDrive, but I'm always afraid, to your point, I'm always afraid to save stuff there. I don't know why. I mean, I've got more documents on my computer than anyone should have. And I'm a OneDrive evangelist, but it's not like I don't trust it. It's like, what if I can't find this stuff in OneDrive?
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, maybe because it's slightly different than just saving it to a typical document. When I have an option at my old company, my IT person was like, Jeff, you're no longer allowed to save stuff on your hard drive. You have to save it to OneDrive. And it freaked me out.
Yeah.
I mean, eating my own dog food, right? Instead of, sharing a file the old school way as an attachment, how about sharing it, with an actual link? Whoa, that's scary.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of thing that we have to be mindful of. Remember back earlier in this presentation, that graph that Al said about the different generations and the way that people learn. As an organization, that's where we're getting people to think about. That's a skill. If it scares people and if they don't have faith in the technology, how do you win them over and help make it easier? You don't overwhelm them with 50 different ways to do things. You say, here's the key way to use it, and you gradually build out that learning pathway, so that whatever the feature, and I'm not necessarily putting these things in the order that I would, but an organization needs to figure that out, because that's what informs a change management program. As the techs are doing all their busy bits and pieces in the background to make this stuff work and to migrate files over with platforms like Xillio, you do need to think about the people journey, and that is about bringing them along and saying, where are you at on this timeline, or where are you at on this learning pathway? Do you know how to upload a file to OneDrive? Do you know how to do that from within the application in Office? Do you know how to find where your OneDrive is, or even SharePoint locations that you work on? And as you gradually build this out, you've got a program of work that you can guide people through, so that you are getting to that end behavior that you want people to take on, which is going paperless, being able to collaborate in the cloud and have your files where you can access them wherever and whenever. Thank you for those who jumped on the board and threw your suggestions there. I'll pull these all together in a bit of a timeline, and we'll share that with the other resources after the presentation. I'll hand the screen back over to you, Al.
Thanks, Darrell. Let me just grab this. We are on the tail end of where we are. So operationally, we need to optimize what this engagement looks like with business when we're saying, well, technology is ready and we've seen how well technology works. And for me, when I look at Darrell, you're going to have to step in here and keep me honest. I mean, my experiences when it comes to operational and change management, the first thing we would normally do is build out these centers of excellence, right? And I remember I wasn't at university, mates of mine, and they used to, third year students, they had this, what they call the hot seat. It looked like the umpire at a tennis match, guy sitting on the top or a girl sitting at the top. And whenever you had a query, you would go to this umpire or this person sitting in the hot seat and you'd ask the question. And in today's world, when we start looking at how do we build knowledge inside of the organization, because there would be a subject matter expert about the technology, and in so doing, the concept of centers of excellence around technology. So you might have a document management center of excellence so that people can come in and understand how to share content, what version control looks like, where you can get auditing from, how you can do real-time co-authoring. I had to slide that in somewhere. But you'd establish these pockets of centers of excellence inside of the organization so that people can actually know where to go. I mean, you mentioned it early on. Well, I think the first one was communicate, right?
Yeah. centers of excellence, another way to term it is a community or a group of SMEs. And so it is about setting up that place for people to ask their questions, to know where to get support from people who can bring context to these skills. It's one thing to say, here's how to do it in the tech, but when it has context around, this is the way we work around here in this organization, this is why it's relevant. Your centers of exactly, communities of practice, all related to that.
And yeah, following up from that, I think a center of excellence is very, and you got to, I wouldn't say choose, you could have a merge of both. Centers of excellence sound very sort of corporate-y. Communities of practice is really around how do you build out these smaller communities inside of your organization that have a common understanding and a common vision. You might find there are people in your organization that really like the collaborative features. And one of the things you asked us earlier today, Darrell, was to say, well, what's your top 3 features that you enjoy inside of Microsoft 365, right? And when I look at how we would logically group people that share a common interest, right? And that's what the communities part of communities of practice are outside of these centers of excellence, right? So centers of excellence would be more, well, I can go to this person and they are a subject matter expert on Teams meetings, right? Or Teams, right? And then when we drill down to the business user side, you might find people gravitate towards the meeting experience inside of Microsoft Teams. And you can create these communities of like-minded individuals that communicate and collaborate around the features that they like the best. And you'll find that they will then build out these communities that practice the technology and actually become the subject matter experts. Does that sort of resonate with you, Darrell?
Yeah, it does, because you might have often heard this phrase over the last few years as this great interest or research and adoption, driving change. And it's not really about driving change, but rather leading change. This is where the business happens. This is where it all actually gets led from people who are part of these communities that are happy to share a few things about what they know. You know, go and see Jennifer, because she's the expert in using Miro in our organization. She'll lead you through this. That's what gives it context. When you see your own people using this tech and they're sharing it in the context of how they work and what you do as a business, then you're more likely to adopt it. And that's the end goal, is to lead change, not be having to cane people and drive it from the back.
Yeah, it is an interesting conundrum to be in, right? Because a top down is usually a stick, right? And bottom up is usually come participate with us, which is the carrot. And it's trying to find that happy medium. Before we hand over to some questions, just the final thoughts, right? And I want to talk through the last bits, the last things and you'll see there's a common theme through the webinar series. We had it in episode 1 and we still have it today. And I think it's a good place to work through. I've worked on large rollouts and when I say large, it's South Africa, right? So for me, large is 10,000 users, right? Because that's what we term large. And then in the old days when we used to architect SharePoint solutions, right? They weren't highly available things, and anything from 25K up was large, right? We were still sort of small to medium when we were building out these SharePoint farms. But right at the beginning, when we do a huge migration where it's multiple technologies, not like Microsoft 365, which is you go there and you get multiple technologies at the same time. You'd roll out email and security, you'd roll out identity and access management, content services, and all of those things. But starting with the transition that the organization, or the impact of the transition of moving people on this journey is going to have on the organization. Have you seen transitional plans come up?
That's what change management is all about. I know on the tech side, some change management concepts are, we're introducing this patch to a server, or we're upgrading Exchange from this to that. That's the tech side of change management. Transitional plans for the people side of it, that's what change management's all about, is planning through addressing some of the points you've got here. We've got the why, and we've got that from the top. We have come up with a communications plan, how we're going to create awareness and make people aware of how to change and what they need to do to prepare. Where do I go to learn how to pick these sorts of things up and gain that knowledge? And then how do I support it going on, which calls back to that communities of practice and the ongoing change fitness of when you step in the cloud, it's going to continue to change. So get used to changing.
You also spoke about on the communication side. I remember doing rollouts, right, when we used to launch these intranets, and usually 3 to 4 days before we actually launched the intranet, we changed the front desk of the office, right? So you've got a building that has 4,000 people in, and they have to walk past reception to get to the elevators and the lifts, right? We would have pom-poms and balloons and chocolates and little notes that we're handing out to everyone, and even stickers on the floor, like follow your way to your path to success, right? How does that impact today's world when remote work is real?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have the lollies, and some change campaigns will go that extra mile and maybe ship a few things here and there to people. But to be honest, I mean, those are good things to create awareness, and to one extent, it's a bit like a disruptive marketing internally. But really, what helps with that transition is making it really clear what is in it for me. You know, really upfront. Cupcakes are nice, chocolates are nice too. Balloons and pom-poms will get my attention, or maybe just get in the way as I'm going through the lifts. But if I've got something that I want to gravitate to, what's in it for me? And I make that message clear in the communication and in the training and in the support and the change network of people that are built up. That theme goes all the way through, and people can pick this up and really adopt it.
And there's some conversations in the chat.
Yeah, I think Jennifer's relaying some questions there.
I can't seem to pick it up. Can you see it, Darrell?
I'll read the first one out. Question is, how do you handle tech dinosaurs? For example, people who have valuable contributions to the organization, but really have issues with tech adoption. Do you need to assign one-to-one coaches? And what do you do when these tech dinosaurs are C-level and level 1 executives?
I'd like to grab that if I could.
Go for it.
I love that, because guess what? They usually are C-level executives. I love the reverse mentoring. I like pairing executives with whatever the new generation is that's coming in, the Z's, whatever they're called, Y's, bring it on. Do the reverse mentoring. First of all, it's a great way for employee engagement, right? And second, let them get to know, who the bosses are, your boss's boss's boss, whatever it is. And again, moving back just one section is, Darrell, you hit on it. Community really is to me, the secrets to this idea of change management and the adoption and getting people to come is community. And then the other secret sauce is really user experience, making it easy to use. Because like I mentioned earlier, OneDrive, if it's not easy to use, I'm not using it. If Yammer, if no one's using it, where the heck is it? Is it an app? Do I have to go to yammer.com? Whatever it is. So those are sort of like my sort of takeaways at the end of the day for secret sauce to change management, successful rollout of your new intranet, whatever it is, migration. And then again, to that question, really the reverse mentoring, and get some quick wins. Find that sort of common ground between the C-level executive and the junior person. And there you go, whatever it is. Maybe you went to the same college. Maybe you went to the same, maybe you like the same sports team, whatever it is. That's it. I'm Jeff. I'm done talking. I'm on Clubhouse.
It is about answering this question with community and pairing people, because that's, if you're setting an example, then that's how you're leading change. We do want to try and get our executives and our tech dinosaurs on board, because what do they become? Success stories. If I can reach this person, then surely you can do it too. Now, the other thing that you'll find in an organization where it is C-level people, the most influential person is actually sometimes that next person below, which might be their executive assistant. They tend to be, and I don't want to sort of trivialize this, but they tend to be the hairdressers, the barbers, the stylists of the organization. You can come in and they know everything about the organization. They know everything about the people. They know the gossip. They know how things work. And this is where you need to go to do this. And you should connect with this person. If you can work with the executive assistant as well, get them really familiar with the skills and how to do things and pick up that technology, they're going to help the person that they support, but also others around. And look, I fully understand, you do have tech executives that love tech and they just do that sort of thing because it's their interest. But a lot that don't have time come out to be tech dinosaurs because they haven't got the time to just drill in and focus on a skill. So if we can support them by enabling their executive assistants, surround them with other examples, show them a community where people are picking up on their skills, then they're likely to either pick it up or become leaders themselves.
Yeah, we've got another question from Ray. How do you manage when the culture of your organization is one where everyone is feeling overloaded, overwhelmed with workloads and are just too busy, tired to learn the new ways of working? NWOW, right? New ways of working.
I got
Exactly.
that. Quit your job and get a job at McDonald's or pickleball, one or the other. Just kidding. I got to tell you, we're all feeling that, right? I think that during the pandemic, we're working longer and harder. I mean, there are all sorts of statistics all over the place. Microsoft came out with that study on the building business resilience, which was a fabulous article. I'm going to find it and put it in the chat. Fabulous article on what to do to survive these times, right? We're all working longer. We're sitting in front of our computer screens. There's so much content, and yet we still have our jobs to do. So I like to take a lot of breaks. That's my favorite thing, is I'm the king of breaks. I like to get outside. I'm a big pickleball player. I don't know if they have pickleball yet in South Africa and New Zealand, but it's very big here in the US. And I like to get outside, change your routine. I mean, stand up. I mean, I'm obsessed with my Apple Watch. Monitor your sitting. Those are just a few on my end.
So from my side,
Ray does. Oh, you go ahead, Al.
When I look at people being overwhelmed, I said to my boss pinged me, I think it was after 9 one night, and he said, "Do you still want to carry on the conversation we had earlier in the day?" And I said, "Well, I've had 12 calls today. I'm sorry, I'm done. It's over. I'm leaving. I can't sit in a call." But when it comes to adopting a new technology or new ways of working, right? And I remember years back, we were going into an organization where we had scanned it was the Department of Social Services, we would scan their registry, right? And fear of technology adoption. And what we did there was, I went to the chief of registry and I said to her, "What is your biggest pain point right now?" She didn't like me at the time because I had people in her office grabbing papers, scanning it. And she said, "Well, when someone requests a file, they take the file and they put it, because it's a social worker, they take the file with them and I never get the file back." And I said to her, "Well, go fetch me a file that we've scanned." And she went to go fetch it and she brought it over to me. And I said, "Open up your browser, type in the the ID, the identification number of the person on the file." And the file popped up electronically because we just scanned it, right? And because I could give her a way of improving one of her biggest business pains, the learning curve changed. Same with my mother, right? My mother wouldn't clean my room because I had a computer in it and she thought the computer was going to explode. That was 30 years ago, 25 years ago, yeah. But yet today, out of necessity and out of need to follow everyone that she knows, because everyone's on Facebook, she's adopted technology. So for me, it's really about finding that component that's going to improve that person's quality of life when it comes to being and feeling overwhelmed. And if you can give them a reason to use the technology, doesn't matter what it takes to understand the technology, they will go through it because it's no longer a task. It's no longer a chore. It becomes something that they want to do because it's going to give them a better experience in whatever the thing is.
And that part of addressing the overwhelm is important. Creating that need so much that they all gravitate to that skill because it is going to make things a bit easier. But circling back a bit to Ray's question too, because he clarified in the follow-up question there, how do you get people engaged in a digital program when they're feeling overwhelmed? And I'll try and answer this briefly because we're kind of at the top of the hour. It is about creating small chunks of learning that people can drive or engage in of their own time. And it is leveraging little videos. It is creating the space for people to go and engage in that skill when they do have the time. If you have access to something that can deliver this on demand and even in context of the work, some platforms that deliver these tips based around, when you're trying to use a tool, then that's good too. There's platforms that gamify this and encourage you to go towards skills like this to engage in and work with. But I think the key thing that we're seeing more, especially in these COVID pandemic conditions, you're right, people are stressed out. How do we get them engaged? It is by surrounding it with bite-sized information, leading it from a community so people can go and ask their questions and get their answers on demand. And then generally just making content available and even time drop-in sessions available for people.
Yeah, Microsoft's also got quite a lot of cheat sheets for various tech. There's a SharePoint cheat sheet, there's a Teams cheat sheet. So in the old days, what we used to do, back in my days in Rhodesia, which is, I always use that phrase, it never works anywhere else but in South Africa because South Africa is the only country that knows what Zimbabwe is. Rhodesia is the old Zimbabwe. But these cheat sheets, we used to laminate and stick it on our walls, right, at the office, so that when we're struggling with how do I do something, boom, you could have, what did we do? Brown paper bag sessions, right? You'd show up, give up people some food, and in this case, phone up Uber Eats and get food delivered to the people that you want to have a conversation with. Then have bite-sized chunks, no pun intended, bite-sized chunks into
totally intended.
to experience the technology that you want them to adopt. And I think that's the important part. When we talk about neuro-linguistic programming, right? NLP, it's reading and feeding. So understand your users and give them what they need. And once you've done that, once you can resolve a problem with technology, and that does sound very foreign, and you'll find out that they are become your ambassadors of change in the organization because you've given them something worthwhile. And that's what you want. The other thing to consider is new users or new joiners in your organization are your ambassadors of change as well, because they don't know any other way of doing it, instead of saying, well, this is how you are going to do it. And I think that's about it from our side. We are 3 minutes past the top of the hour. If my clicker would work, not to the end of the slide. So just from our side, thank you for joining us on this webinar series with Xillio to talk about change management and Microsoft 365, what you should or try at least get to know, because we don't have 3 days to talk about this. Jeff, what is your Twitter handle, mate?
Jay Willie, baby.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. So if you would like to reach out to Darrell directly, you can find him, and it's 2 R's, not 1 R. It's Darrell as a service on Twitter. My handle is @Alistair Pugin. If you want to chat to Xillio about the enterprise migration strategy that they have around migrating from legacy ECM system to SharePoint Online, please reach out to either Jay Willie if you're in the US, or if you want to speak to someone in a different dialect of English than American, please reach out to @Xillio on Twitter. You can find Xillio on LinkedIn, Facebook, and I don't think Xillio is on Instagram. But thank you once again for joining us. Please reach out to us if you have any other questions, and we'll catch you in 3 to 4 weeks with our session on compliance. Ciao, ciao.